Hello, everyone, and welcome to 25 Years Later's new podcast called The Criterion Collectors. I'll be your host, Tim Rosenberger. I'm a writer with the site. What we're going to be doing on the podcast is we're going to be discussing various films and genres and directors and actors that have been highlighted by the home video company, the Criterion Collection. We'll be talking about films the Criterion Collection has released on DVD and Blu-ray, as well as films that it has released on its streaming service, the Criterion channel. And for our first episode, we're going to kind of go and do something big, and we're going to be discussing the Criterion Collection's new Godzilla box set, which it has released as its 1000th spine. For those who don't know, Criterion, for each of its releases, has a spine number. The 1000th spine number is a collection of Godzilla films from the original film in 1954 to the last film in its Godzilla's first era called The Terror of Mechagodzilla, and that film was released in 1975. It's a total of 15 films. We're going to be discussing some of those films today. We're not going to talk about all of them just because we don't have time, and if we discussed all of them, we would be here all day. To discuss those with me are two fellow 25 Years Later's writers, Gus Wood and Katie Bienvenue. Thank you guys for coming on to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So, again, we're going to be discussing a few of these films today, and released concurrently with this podcast, there is a top 10 video related to Godzilla and this box set that you can find on our YouTube channel, and you can find the link to that attached to this podcast. And there's also a comprehensive article that I wrote that you can also find on the 25 Years Later's website called 25yearslatersite.com. And in that article, I go through all of the films in the box set and just briefly discuss each one. But today we're going to be talking about some of the films specifically. So why don't we get started? To kind of start things off, when did you guys first get introduced to these Japanese Godzilla films? And, like, how old were you and what were the circumstances around that?
I forgot exactly how old I was, but it was definitely single digits, and it was through my uncle. My uncle had a lot of them on VHS and also Laserdisc, and every Sunday when we would go over at my grandmother's house, we would go straight to his room, and he would introduce us to something new. So my brother and I were definitely coming out of there pretending that we were monsters.
What about you, Gus? How did you first get introduced to it?
Like every red-blooded kid, I played with action figures, and I remember my friend Alex, as an elementary school kid, had Godzilla action figures, and I had no idea what Godzilla was, but he looked awesome, because he always does. And then, growing up in Atlanta, we had a small theater called The Plaza, and they showed Ibira Horror of the Deep versus Godzilla. And I saw that when I was like 11 or 12, and seeing that movie in a theater with other people definitely will make you love Godzilla.
What about the movies initially kind of grabbed you?
I think it was like initially the monsters, really, because I was too young to like really pay attention to the plot. Like, having done rewatches ever since, the plot's become more dominant for me. But when I was younger, it was certainly just the creatures and the fact that like they were people in suits and not like CGI like a lot of things were growing up in the 90s.
For me personally, it was I love watching things get destroyed, and there's no better vehicle for that than Godzilla. It was also like one of the earliest foreign film experiences I ever had. It was the first movie with dubbing or subtitles that I was conscious of. And I don't know. It's just a big, green, lovable monster. You can't respond to that.
When did you guys first actually get more into it and to the point where you were watching the kind of original Japanese versions of them?
Probably a few years ago. I want to say maybe... Actually, yeah, really 3 or 4 years ago when they were announcing like the new Godzilla film coming out, I decided to do like a rewatch of the other ones.
And you're talking
and
about...
it was the first time, yeah, the 2014 one.
Yeah.
And then like basically all I could have really found was the original Japanese dialect ones, and I ended up just plowing through those and actually being more entertained by hearing how they should actually be sound instead of the American dubbed.
For me, my wife is actually a huge Godzilla fan, and we were both really excited for the 2014 movie. We weren't married yet, so I figured to impress her, I might as well know what the hell I'm talking about Godzilla. So I went back and
Yeah.
watched all the movies just so I could, stay current and be impressive.
Well, I probably have both of you beat because to prepare for all this, this was actually my first time watching any of the original Godzilla films.
Oh,
Yeah.
8 out of 10.
Oh, yay!
I'm watching these very fresh. I've been watching them over the past little while, so I am freshly not a Godzilla virgin, I guess. But I had seen the Roland Emmerich, that terrible movie that he did. And the one you were talking about earlier, the 2014-15, whatever that was, Godzilla film. So for the original film, a mysterious force is destroying Japanese ships and eating all the fish near an island called Odo. An elder island resident believes it to be an ancient menace that the islanders used to placate with human sacrifices and all that. To help investigate the matter, the Japanese government is having a famous paleontologist. He's going to investigate, and he discovers that an ancient dinosaur, for lack of a better word, has awakened because of recent hydrogen bomb tests in the ocean. The islanders have named the monster Godzilla. Godzilla, when he wakes up, goes on a rampage, and they try bullets, tanks, nothing's working. He just plows through power lines, buildings, and they hope to destroy him somehow, but the answer to that might lie with a love triangle between a colleague of the paleontologist, a ship captain, and a scientist who's working on a secret experiment. So, yeah, like I said earlier, this was my first introduction to the Japanese Godzilla films. I really loved the kind of slow build of the film, and there's this kind of ancient menace thing that they're kind of building up throughout the film, and it has a great mood that they have in it that I think is really kind of unique. Unique for films, but also unique for the series. I don't think they ever really have that again.
I totally agree. I feel like the pacing of this film really makes it be a standalone. The story just felt natural, which I feel like after this one and the second one, they seem to lose that element.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
But it's definitely the most prominent and was colloquially known as the first of the kaiju movies of the first big monster. There are definitely ones before that, but for brevity's sake, everyone calls it the first one.
This is also a really good standalone story.
Yeah.
If you take out the monster, the story itself is also still pretty strong.
No, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And it has probably the strongest, we can get into this maybe a little bit later in terms of a general conversation, but a big aspect of all the Godzilla films is that they usually focus, more screen time is given to the human characters and whatever they're doing, and their interrelationships or their conflicts with other people or whatever. More time is given to that than is spent on Godzilla or any of the other monsters. And I think the first film has probably the best of the human stories, at least the best of the kind of more, it's dealing with people in a love triangle and stuff like that. Those kind of more mundane storylines. That this one I think has the best story of that and has some of the best acting in it, and it's definitely the most serious out of all of them. Almost a dire tone to the whole thing. Not dire, but a bleak tone to the whole thing.
And it is also in black and white, which I think adds to that moodiness. Whether it was the technological limitations of the time or an aesthetic decision, having it be in black and white almost made me kind of want to adjust my TV settings and watch the rest of them in black and white, just to see if it holds up or has any of that tonality. But I really doubt it does, just based on how completely different this one is.
Yeah, with it being black and white, also, it makes everything feel so much more real because of the lighting and everything. It doesn't look like they're models. their toy models like they do in the later films so much.
Mhm.
They look like they literally just built buildings and blew them apart for the effect. And that also play with the lighting when he like takes down the power lines. The first time we see that happen is pretty cool too.
The movie's almost, I mean, not quite, but it's almost like horror movie-esque in certain respects. And the black and white with the lighting, with the darker lighting, and the kind of, then, you know, when you have almost a spotlight on Godzilla as a creature, there was more of a menace to him, which I don't think would have been quite there if in color. I think you dread him more in black and white than you would in color, at least with what they're doing.
Going off what you said about like with the horror thing, when I was re-watching this, when it got to the scene with the fish tank, I instantly was thrown back in time to being a little kid watching that scene for the first time, being scared out of my mind because it was terrifying. Like, it's terrifying seeing those fish dissolve in front of your eyes. I still, like, remember certain aspects of this film that I totally thought I forgot about until you see it again, and it sticks with you. The whole scene with him at the end under the water watching Godzilla as the bomb's going off, it was terrifying. It stays with you. And I think that's, like, what makes this film especially so timeless, but also, like, it does borderline horror.
Yeah, there's a scene, for people who haven't seen the film, well, there's one scene where, through means we won't get into, some fish, basically they turn from fish to skeletons, and then the final scene of the film, they're trying to do something, and Godzilla is kind of stalking our main characters, and there's a lot of great shots of him underwater in that sequence. And they really build, more than any other film, and it's kind of understandable why they would do this for this film, more than any of the other ones, but they really build Godzilla up, and he's probably the most unstoppable in this film than he is throughout the rest of the series, where they do kind of downgrade how powerful he is. Godzilla is an allegory for nuclear weapons, and you can sense that allegory when he's just, plowing through everything, and there's like just nothing people can do. Thousands, if not more, people are dying. There's just nothing left after he tears through the city. More than that, though, I felt what really kind of works for the film is kind of the smaller moments that kind of supplement those bigger moments, where like there's a very, very brief scene on a train where there's just some Japanese citizens talking about Godzilla and the destruction he has caused up to that point, and they make references to the bombs that were dropped in 1945, and it helps you put you in the mind of what the people in the movie are going through, but what the Japanese people watching it would have gone through. Because if you think about it, this movie came out in 1954, and that would have been less than 10 years after the bombs were dropped, and so this is a very, very fresh thing for people, and I'm sure the imagery of that, it hits hard now, but it definitely would have hit hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Literally 9 years later, they're kids that grew up knowing that happened, and seeing it in a movie theater mentioned like that, everybody knows what that means, and you still know what it means, but they know how that felt.
You also have them also mentioning how shortly after the war it is.
Yeah.
They have conversations about, I remember back in the war with the bombs, and it's surreal to think, like, how short of a time period this came out right after. Oh, that theme. That theme that will like echo in every single film to follow. It's so weird how like the most simplest of themes just become the most iconic.
Yeah, the score for these films is actually really good. It's one of there's certain things maybe quality-wise that fluctuate a little bit throughout the series, but the scores for all the films really maintain a steady quality throughout. I wasn't necessarily surprised by the score of the first film and how good that was. That wasn't terribly surprising, but it's how well they maintain that through the different scores that they do and the different songs that they do, which can be very varied in tone, from very serious to fun to very silly.
They're really important when it comes to establishing tone. The first one does have that kind of dark, more almost like an operatic score, whereas like the later films, when we get into more like Goofy Zilla, they are a bit lighter in tone, and they feel more like a 1930s adventure rather than like a dark allegory.
The thing I have with the score is that, like, you hear and you instantly know Godzilla. And one of the things I really love is, especially with Destroy All Monsters, is when they start mixing monster themes together. And it's funny because I remember listening to it after not having heard it in a while. And the minute that the music started up, I knew exactly which film that it was set to. Just because it's just a collaboration of all these different themes together. And besides the original film, the Destroy All Monsters is probably the best out of all the series when it comes to score music.
So you think that they all had very identifiable themes, so you were able to kind of tell which one was which very easily?
Oh yeah, and it's funny because I still hum along with it, and then like a few minutes I would be like, wait a minute, I'm doing this. So like even now, like in my head it's playing as I'm like describing it and talking about it, and they're just very subtle differences, but those very subtle differences really make an impact when you can be anywhere and then suddenly just hear like certain notes and know, oh, I know where that is.
It should be noted that what I said at the top, that the scores are very varied, is really true, because you have the main theme for the first film is this very, very dark, serious, doom and gloom score, and then one of the later ones is something akin to, like, it's not easy to be a monster, and this lyrical, silly, kiddie theme. So, I mean, they really varied the musical output from film to film.
Yeah, this is a thematic that's carried through also, but like the notion that Godzilla is ancient and also a direct response to something very modern. Like, he's this ancient force that's been awakened by H-bomb testing. That juxtaposition of like old and new and like modern repercussions and an ancient manifestation of that is like, it's a thematic that's set up here and I think carries through the entire Godzilla mythos.
No, yeah, it is an interesting kind of juxtaposition, and it's kind of a testament to science fiction in films using allegories for very modern problems, because at the end of the day, we still have to kind of relate to them in some way, and a monster film is probably a good way to kind of hook people into maybe a deeper message about the dangers of nuclear weapons and the destruction that they can ultimately cause for us.
One of the things that's interesting is, despite how tonally different the rest of the movies in the Criterion Collection are from this one, it is amazing how much of the groundwork for like the average Godzilla movie, how much of that skeleton is in this. You know, it's an environmental cause. Godzilla he's kind of more of an elemental force than anything else. And it's half about Godzilla dealing with the environment and half about the humans dealing with Godzilla. And those kind of thematics, even to like the wackiest ones much later in the series, that stuff is still there. Like the DNA is still there.
This becomes more apparent in maybe the second film, but probably the third film onward. There is a certain structure to the films that you can definitely see in that. They usually start with some sort of mystery aspect, then you get maybe a kind of a brief look at whatever monsters are in it, and then the last half hour, 20 minutes or so is the monster fight. So yeah, and that is all here in this version. So it does lay the groundwork, even though they'd made a lot of modifications tonally and character-wise and all that stuff as they went along. The first actual follow-up to Godzilla was, I believe, the very next year in 1955, and it was called Godzilla Raids Again. It was the first film to introduce another monster, and the kind of story of that is, after the events of the first film, that Godzilla was pretty definitively killed, but a year later, another Godzilla creature who acts, and is called the exact same thing, is kind of woken up, and the military and 2 Japanese pilots set out to defeat him once again through means that they have to be different from the events of the first film because of what happens in the first film at the end of that one. But in the meantime, Godzilla comes up against a spiny 4-legged kaiju called, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Anguirus? Anguirus. There we go. Anguirus. However you pronounce that. And they are both kind of just instinctively out to destroy stuff, and they come up against each other in a mano-a-mano battle. So what did you guys think about the first kaiju against kaiju fight in one of these films?
First off, I totally thought he was like an armadillo on steroids. That's what he looks like. He looks like an armadillo on steroids. I'm kind of sad we only got one actual fight between the 2 of them, and then he gets taken out so quickly.
Yeah.
But then appears later on in something else.
Yeah.
But it's really, really quick. Because it's the first, they are figuring out, well, how quickly should we make this battle? Are audiences really going to want to see this? You can tell in the pacing of everything that it's very experimental in, will it or won't it work?
Yeah, I felt the same way. It was. They might have a brief tussle earlier in the film, I can't remember, but they only have one real fight scene in the whole film. And it's interesting because unlike the later films, it's not really the main focus of the film. Like all the other films, Godzilla fighting whatever monster it is, it's a pretty big deal, and they usually save the big fight for the climax or for part of the climax. This one, it's just kind of like he runs into the creature while he's destroying stuff. He fights him real quick.
In the middle.
Yeah, it falls really in the middle.
It was in the middle because the whole film still revolved around we need to get rid of Godzilla.
Yeah, it's really more of an obstacle for Godzilla.
This other thing was just like a side.
It's a side quest.
Yeah.
It is so much of just a clear sequel. What's worse than one Godzilla? 2 Godzillas? And the fact that it follows that similar formula of it's humans v monsters. And they haven't really figured out the monster v monster part of the formula quite yet. So it becomes, he's a complication for Godzilla, and Anguirus is. But then again, not really. And I just think it's so interesting to see that, that's what they're trying to do, is one more monster and see if they can make the same movie and have it be as successful or as memorable or more so.
And I think it's sad that they were still kind of figuring stuff out at this point, because I do like the creature design. I think he's really cool looking, and I think their battle that they have is a fun one. It's just that they don't really quite know how to handle it by that point. So I think that monster and that monster design deserves to be more featured better than it was, but since they don't really know what they're doing yet, it's almost half of an idea. They just kind of threw it in there. It almost feels like. I will say, even by this film, though, it's starting to develop into what it will become, because already, while this one still isn't overly silly or anything, but it is a lighter film. There's a bit of comedic relief in it, a little bit of silly stuff in it.
It really felt like the humans are like caricatures, or starting to become caricatures.
Exactly, yeah. It does have a returning character in it. Most of these films don't, or they have returning actors, which can be kind of confusing because they almost always play different people. But the paleontologist character does come back, though. He's there for one scene. I was gonna say
he's one scene, and he hardly has any lines in it.
No, he's really just there for exposition, which I found really disappointing because I knew he was going to be in it because I saw him on the poster for the film when I was looking the film up, and I was like, oh, he'll be back and stuff. That'll be fun, and I like that actor. And then he was in an early scene, basically describing Godzilla, showing some archive footage that makes no sense why they have this footage in the reality of the movie. They have this well shot, well edited piece of Godzilla destroying their city somehow. But
those news stations, man, they get a lot of stuff.
They really get a lot of angles when this giant behemoth is firing atomic breath at them. But yeah, he's there for that one scene, and then he disappears, sadly, never to be seen again. I think in any Godzilla, the actor shows up at least once more, but a lot of these films don't have they have continuity, but they don't at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a very loose continuity where they mostly work with each other, but it can sometimes not really mesh with what came beforehand. This film isn't as much of a problem because it's more of a direct continuation, but the later films have more of that problem.
It becomes more about thematic continuity than narrative continuity. As long as all the movies feel the same. They don't have to have the same actors or the same story.
世界の為政者たちが黙って見ているはずがないんだ。必ずこれを武器として使用するに決まっている。原爆対原爆、水爆対水爆、その上さらにこの新しい恐怖の武器を人類の上に加えることは
I mentioned earlier, the human stories tend to take more of a focus than the monster stories, really, in a way. I mean, in some cases, the monsters almost seem, not that it doesn't work or anything, or that they're shoehorned in, but it sometimes feels like the monsters are superfluous, or however you pronounce that word, to what the humans are doing. Like, you can almost have like a island expedition film or a romance film, and then there's a happens
like
to be a
they wrote
monster
the
in it.
human part first and then decide let's add in monsters.
Almost, kind of in a way. I mean, it works. I don't, it's
It
not
works
like they
for
just.
some of them.
Yeah, some of them more than others. Yeah.
They're almost treated like natural disasters. Like they could be earthquakes or hurricanes or whatever. They're just an elemental inconvenience to the plot.
How do you guys feel about again, the human stories can be, again, just about relationships between characters. There can be this governmental struggle. There can be gangsters. There can be corrupt business people and all that stuff. So there can be various levels to these human stories. But overall, do you guys like the human stories in these movies, or are they just kind of a distraction from what you want to see, which might be the big monsters and stuff?
Depends on the film. For some of them, I found that I actually enjoy the human story as much as I like the monsters. And then there was others where I'm like, okay, you guys need to go away now. Where are the monsters? Can someone step on you, please? Godzilla, where are you? So it really depends on the film.
I think they're necessary for like any Godzilla movie in terms of like scale. Like they have to have problems that could never matter to Godzilla, both in like size and emotional nuance. And I think that's like really vital. It's almost like the White Walkers in Game of Thrones. Like everybody else is quibbling over who gets the throne, and then there's this force that's coming to kill everyone. And I think having that contrast is like really important to a Godzilla story, so that we understand that like Godzilla's on another level than us. And like it's not necessarily he's superior, he's just the things that are incomprehensible to us are to him understandable, and vice versa. And I think that's really important.
Well, also from a marketing standpoint, too, because, you have an audience that you want to bring in, and you want to make sure this film can be marketed to different people. So, you will have, like, a story involving humans that might draw in, teenagers or someone looking for something in particular that they might find, whereas other people might come in and expecting, I want monsters and smashing. The wide range of what draws people in is definitely witnessed when they do certain stories with these characters.
And you do need them because Godzilla, not that he doesn't have character in this, but especially in the first film, the early films, he is really just this kind of unstoppable force terrorizing stuff. And they do a better job later of giving him more of a personality that you could actually follow if it was just him on his own. But especially
he is so snarky in the later films.
He is. But in the early films, yeah, he's just kind of this beast terrorizing Japan. So you do kind of, and he doesn't talk, and he's not terribly intelligent, so you need something to balance that out. Otherwise it would just be it'd almost be a bit insufferable, because I love the Godzilla shriek thing, but hearing that for constantly,
oh my god,
annoying.
There was a few times in certain films when it would just be and from something else back and forth, and I'm like, okay, can we stop, please?
Yeah.
Shush. Someone knock him out.
Yeah, when the monsters talk, it can be a bit painful because they're all doing the kind of ear-piercing sounds back and forth. Luckily, there's not tons of that. I think they wise.
In the earlier films, there wasn't as much, but as you get later down the road and they add more monsters, it becomes more and more.
Mm-hmm.
I think also, just now that we're talking about the human stories, it also allows the films to be more versatile. Like, a Godzilla fight movie is going to be that regardless, but you can layer it with, like you said, gangs or secret military operations or corporate espionage. Those things can kind of layer on top of it and make it a different kind of movie. So it can almost be like a Western or something where it's all the same setting and aesthetic tropes, but with a different movie on top of it. That also helps the story and like the Godzilla franchise stay kind of young and relevant. Even now, we're talking about climate change on a different level with the King of Monsters that just came out versus back then we're talking about nuclear power, and that's because of the human story. Godzilla's always going to be a big monster kicking
I
the
kinda
shit
like-
out of either a city or another big monster.
Yeah, I like that it can play with genre based off of using what story they decide they want to tell with the humans. Because you can literally go anywhere with the humans as far as, like, deciding what type of story you want to tell. And then, you know, bringing in the monsters is its own thing. So, yeah, you can really do fantasy or sci-fi or drama or time travel or anything. And then just layer on the monsters afterwards. But yeah, you can really tackle any genre. That's what kind of like is appealing now. I didn't appreciate it as much as a kid, but rewatching the films now, really, I appreciate the human stories a lot more.
When I was watching them, in a way, I mean, I like, you know, big monsters fighting each other, but I think those fights were almost, not that they're bad most of the time, but they were almost to me, almost the least interesting thing about them. It was really what was going on with the people that I think grabbed my attention more, and if those were bad, I was more likely to dislike the film than if the monster fights were bad or underwhelming. And you're right, they can do so many different genres, you know, spy stuff, gangster stuff, love stories. I think now, at least the monster films I'm thinking of, they are more kind of just focused on, not that they don't have subplots in them, but, you know, they're more focused directly on the monster thing, and there's a more of a generic monster movie feel to them, and they aren't maybe playing with genres as much as these films were, and making them all, I mean, they have a distinctive feel to them, and they're all distinctively Godzilla films of that era, but they are varied.
Which is sad, because if films today took the chance to do what these films did, they could do a really good job with it, given, like, a lot of how people think and write nowadays. Like, I can really see them doing a monster movie and then having it be another subgenre besides monster and having it work. But I feel like a lot of people are stuck in their ways, and usually they make it all about, like, how the monster was created, which usually ends up being some nuclear explosion, so it becomes a nuclear film.
And again, I don't want to make it out like, you know, monster films now are always the same. I think, you know, they can play a little bit. I know Guillermo del Toro, when he was making the first Pacific Rim movie, he said that it was really more, I mean, it had kaiju influences and Godzilla influences and stuff, obviously, but he said it was more kind of structured like a sports film. So some people do play with that a little bit.
Have you seen what is it called? Deep Sea? It came out in the 90s. It had Famke Janssen in
Deep
it.
Blue Sea?
It was which one? Deep Rising. Yes.
Oh, Deep Rising.
Deep Rising was like the mysterious creatures from underneath the sea who attack the kind of like Poseidon Adventure meets monsters. It was very playful and it was comedic, and yet it still had seriousness to it. The monsters were like there, but it was more like, you know, surviving this boat that is sinking sort of like thing. So it's one of the rare films that actually play, and not a lot of people know it, which is sad. It plays with genres as well.
I would also be remiss if I didn't introduce now my insane theory that Godzilla and James Bond are the same people. They have the same cinematic journey. They start out as straight representations of their genre, and then their audience have like ballooned into massive size, and then they tried to get more international appeal, and so they became explorations of different kinds of genres. So like all the James Bondiness of a James Bond movie is secondary to the kind of movie that the filmmaker wanted to make. Whether it's like a procedural detective story, whether it's a love story, whether it's a blaxploitation film or a kung fu movie, James Bond can play with that as well as Godzilla can in any of the Godzilla movies. The human story and the genre tropes around James Bond do the same thing in that they present a similar story in a different way.
Yeah, it's Sean Connery.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, they start out with Sean Connery and they end up, at least the films that we're talking about, they end being kind of Roger Moore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And now with the 2014 Godzilla and King of Monsters, it's
They're
just
going
like
back
the
to being
Daniel Craig
serious.
Bonds, where they're trying to be serious again. Exactly.
Now I'm gonna watch
It's
Godzilla
like-
films going, would you like your fish shaken or not stirred?
Your city. Would you like your city shaken or stirred?
Oh God, yeah. Well, that's what I mean, and that's what we need. We need a Godzilla versus 007 movie, where he,
I've been saying this for years. They need to fight.
Well, but no, what they need to fight, and then they need to, get kind of close in the sequel, and that's, then they sleep together, and that's how you have Son of Godzilla.
That's so true. They definitely need to become like a friends to lovers situation, or enemies to lovers situation.
Yeah, I mean, we can.
So important.
Yeah, we can do that.
And I think you guys just broke me.
What? We can have a pregnant Daniel Craig in the movie.
First you, then Hollywood.
With a Godzilla baby.
The next film that they released, there was a big break between Godzilla Raids Again and the third film in the series. The second film came out in 1955, and then the third film didn't come out until 1963, so there was an 8-year time gap. By the time we get to this one, the films from here on out are all in color, they're in widescreen, and the third film is very indicative of what you'll see from there on out, at least in the era we're talking about, 54 to 75. It was King Kong versus Godzilla, where basically a pharmaceutical company, they go to an island where King Kong is, they bring him back to mainland Japan, and they're hoping, I think, because they have a Godzilla and they have a monster that'll help promote their business, improve their profits or something like that. And in the meantime, Godzilla wakes from his slumber once again, and they try to pit King Kong versus Godzilla in order to kind of stop Godzilla from destroying Japan once again. So this film, I think when I read, it was the first and only time, while there are certainly comedic elements in later films, this is I think the only time they were more trying to make sort of a comedy with this film, and you can definitely see that because this film is definitely much lighter than the other two films, and there's more comedic characters in it. There's more camera mugging, not necessarily bad camera mugging, but there's some there's some physical comedy. Even I think between Godzilla and King Kong, there's a little bit of comedic elements to it to a certain degree when they're fighting. And it's interesting because they're still playing, Godzilla at this point is still very much the bad guy, and it's the first time they're trying to purposefully use another monster to stop Godzilla. And it's more confident in what they're doing. Again, they fight, I think, once somewhere in the middle of the film very briefly, and then they fight for the second and last time near the end of the film, and that's more of a bigger, showy, featured fight than what we saw in the second film. So they're getting more of their, finding their legs with it. But what did you guys think of it and the changes that they made from the first two films to this film in terms of, how they're doing it in tone and all that stuff?
I was really curious as to how this movie came to be, because it's East meets West in that King Kong is a Western kaiju essentially, and Godzilla is obviously Japanese. So it's how did this come about? And apparently, initially, the guy who animated King Kong in the first one wanted him to fight a giant Frankenstein, and then decided Godzilla instead because they got Japanese money behind the project. They took out Frankenstein to replace him with Godzilla, and that makes a ton of sense, because that explains why there's so much lightheartedness to it. Frankenstein was meeting Abbott and Costello, and had a tradition of that kind of thing, and now it makes sense that he's doing the same thing here. He's just replaced with Godzilla.
It was so funny because I always thought King Kong, America, Godzilla, Japan, and it was just their take on the whole US versus Japan thing. And for some reason, this is one of my least favorites.
Yeah.
And I can't say exactly why, but also rewatching it now, they were very brave when they did the island scene, and they have basically, it looks like everyone's in blackface.
It's kind of an Asian blackface. I don't know if it's even necessarily blackface or is this supposed to be dark-skinned Asians?
Those are not natural dark skin.
Yeah.
I had to pause it to look. I remember rewatching it going, are they? Oh my goodness, they are. And it was like a culture shock a little bit there. But it also goes to show like a difference in cultures generally, because I know that that's not a big thing anywhere else except for here in the United States, for obvious reasons. But yeah, it was so weird watching this. King Kong is it's like our version of Godzilla in a way. So it's very like, feels like it's pitting country against country, which I don't know how I feel about that. But given it was the 60s, coming off of everything else going on with the Cold War, I guess it makes sense.
How do we feel about the lighter, more kind of comedic tone to the film?
I mean, I think based on how the rest of the series trajectory compares with this, it's like they had a good idea but didn't go far enough. It manages to not do either one well. Like, it doesn't tell a compelling Godzilla story, and it isn't as funny or lighthearted or like adventurous as the later films in the series. So it's like they had a good idea but didn't trust themselves that it was a good idea, and so we kind of get like a weaker film as a result of that hesitation.
Kind of like with what they did in the second film with the monster bottle, where they didn't know whether or not it was going to work, so they played it safe. This one does that with the human story.
Exactly. It's a huge opportunity for like camp and cheese to do Godzilla versus King Kong. And I feel like they went for it but didn't trust themselves to go far enough with it.
They do a better job of featuring the monster fight at the end of the film, because it is at the end of the film and they build it up. I mean, the film's called King Kong vs. Godzilla, so it's a bigger deal in this film than it was with the second film. But even with that, I don't feel like it's a bit underwhelming. I think the fight is for a couple reasons. One, for me anyway, they do downgrade Godzilla in this film. They say in this film, for some reason that I don't understand, the King Kong electricity makes him powerful, which makes no sense. And
that makes zero sense.
Yeah, and then Godzilla, even though one of the biggest scenes in the first film was him just basically plowing through some power lines, for some reason electricity hurts Godzilla now and makes him weaker, which is really ridiculous.
Makes zero sense, seeing as he thrives on nuclear energy.
Yeah, and he survives hydrogen bomb blasts, but for some reason electricity hurts him now. It's kind of silly. But yeah, I mean, I guess they have to do that to make it more of an even fight. But I've noticed that, like, in the first film, he would use his atomic breath, like, all the time, and stuff would burst into flames. But anytime he's fighting, like, a creature, he uses it sparingly, even though he could just, like, light King Kong on fire and then walk away. He decides to hit him with rocks and stuff and kick him and punch him and stuff. So it's a bit ridiculous that they have to downgrade Godzilla so much in order for the fight to work. But
it's like Batman v Superman, where they have to give Superman kryptonite, so it's kind of fair.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking that too. Yeah.
You also get sassy Godzilla in this. He's like taunting King Kong for the longest time before like anything actually happens. In the first few minutes of the fight, it's like, come at me, bro. And I think, like any Godzilla film, when you start just voicing Godzilla and giving him like a voice just to go with the body language, it just makes it better.
Yeah, and there's some even more ridiculous stuff that comes later. But yeah, there is the start of the Godzilla sass in this film, which I hope most of the time was intentional, but I wonder if sometimes it was accidental.
There's one in particular, and I now forgot what film it is, where he raises his arms almost like the lotus move, like either karate or something, but he stands there and he just raises both arms as if, but his wrists are down, so it's like he's doing like a praying mantis move where he's about to kick someone.
Like Daniel-san in the Karate Kid. Like the crane kick.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's doing that. And I'm trying to remember who he's battling, but I'm just watching it, just going, I should take this seriously. But at the same time, this is just really hilarious.
Yeah. It's one of the disadvantages of having guys in suits is that they often don't move like a giant prehistoric dinosaur would. They kind of move like a person in a suit would move, with like karate moves and stuff.
I mean, we don't know that.
Well, I feel like I don't feel like
it could have moved like that.
Oh, I don't think a T-Rex probably did a crane kick.
We don't know.
We don't know for sure, but I think if they did that in Jurassic Park, I think people might have laughed a little bit. Do you guys find the fight satisfying, and like how does it compare to like other fights later in the series?
I don't think they nailed the fight formula yet. I think even Godzilla versus Anguirus in the second movie was better than this one.
Yeah.
As anticlimactic as it was, I think it was still more exciting than. It's almost like they shouldn't have spent the entire movie hyping up the fight if this is what it was going to be. I think the use of stop motion versus the more kinetic stuff that you've seen with like sock puppets or guys in suits, like at least they move naturally and it doesn't feel stilted in that Ray Harryhausen kind of way. It just feels more organic when they stop pretending that it's anything less than guys in suits.
What do you guys think makes a good monster fight in these films? Is there a certain thing that makes them work, like the build-up, or just the situation that's been built up around them, or is there something a key to making these fights work?
I kind of like when they build up on their strengths, and there's a lot more physicality to both of them. In the second film, where he's biting Godzilla's neck as they're like fighting, and it's like they're using every aspect of the creature that you could possibly have to battle against one another. Whereas in the example of the King Kong Godzilla fight, there's a lot of rolling around. There's a lot of rolling around, and there's not a lot of clear claws or, biting or anything. It's just, throwing things at one another and then rolling around on the ground. And then they both are exhausted. I kind of like when they play with what they have. If they have spikes, then they use the spikes. If they have, sharp teeth, then they're biting. If they blow fire, they are blowing fire.
You like when they play up the animal aspects of them.
Yeah, the animal aspects of the creatures.
Yeah, because this film introduces Godzilla's habit of, he likes to throw rocks a lot for some reason. So he'll always find a rock when he goes up against somebody and just throws it at them instead of, using his claws or his tail, or again, he can just set them on fire. He just throws a big rock at them, and I think it almost never works, but he keeps doing it anyway.
I'm like, dude, you have teeth, bite.
Yeah.
You have some sharp teeth. Use those things, man.
I think a signature move is key, similar to using what they have. I think they have to be unique enough. I feel like King Kong's fighting style, for whatever it's worth, is not evident in his fight with Godzilla.
King Kong's fighting style is smash.
Whereas King Kong is an allegory for a boxer. He should be boxing. We should be able to appreciate, they have different skill sets. They're not the same monster fighting each other the same way.
What might have helped with this fight scene, it might have been if they had put them both in a jungle or in a city or something. You could have had King Kong, I don't know, going on trees and jumping from stuff and all that stuff, and Godzilla plowing down whatever it is, Instead, you just kind of have, these two people fighting in this big open area, and they're just kind of punching each other. Like you guys are saying, they're not really taking advantage of their skills, so to speak. The actors playing Godzilla and King Kong in the suits might as well just be out of their suits, fighting each other for all the Godzilla and King Kong elements they have in them.
It bears repeating, but why does a pharmaceutical company want King Kong?
For a spokesperson.
Because
it's publicity.
Oh, well, sure, of course.
Well, yeah, it makes sense. I think,
They're trying to go viral.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, I think...
What sells better than a giant ape?
Yeah, I think Zantac is going to use Mothra for the next thing, Mothra will have heartburn or something, and then he'll take it and he'll be like, oh, hey, I'm all better thanks to Zantac, and he'll smile at the screen, that sort of thing.
As in two girls sing.
Allergy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think giant moth butterfly things, they'll have allergies. They need allergy medicine.
My mistake. It was a silly question.
Yes,
I'm totally allergic to this pollen that I spray.
Yeah, he's allergic to himself. Didn't you study kaiju in school, Gus? The next film in the series came out the next year, 1964, I think. And again, it was another verse film. It was Mothra versus Godzilla. And Mothra had already been in his own film recently-ish to this. I forget the exact year, but it was probably, I think, like a year or two before this film came out. And now he's one of the two monsters in this film. And
Sorry, you don't see me, but I'm flailing. Yes, Mothra.
And we'll get to
Sorry,
why she's...
Mothra.
Okay. Well, calm down. Let me tell people what it's about, then you can squeeze some more.
Sorry, guys.
It's a greedy Japanese land developer and his son take ownership of a giant egg that washes ashore, and they want to build like a theme park around the egg and stuff, even though they don't know what's going to hatch out of the egg. But, and this is where the series gets kind of weird, two fairies, which are basically hand-sized Japanese twin women that were played by two Japanese senior sisters called the Peanuts. They travel to Japan from a secluded island called Infant Island to get the egg back, because there's a giant creature on the island called Mothra, which is basically a cross between, I guess basically a moth and a butterfly. And the fully grown Mothra that's on the island right now is dying, and the egg will hatch a new Mothra, which will then continue the other Mothra's legacy of protecting the island. And Mothra, unlike Godzilla, is more of a peacekeeping creature as opposed to a destructive one. Eventually, a battle ensues when the two fairies agree to let Mothra fight Godzilla, who is again awakened and is destroying Japan. So, back to Katie. So, why are you screaming over this film?
So, Mothra versus... Well, actually, just the Mothra film. I think I was introduced to Mothra before I was introduced to Mothra versus Godzilla. So, I absolutely loved, like, my brother was all, I loved Godzilla, and I'm like, but I love Mothra for the longest time. And I think it was because, like, we finally... I'm going to sound so lame here, because we finally got female representation in the monster universe. Because I was like, yes, finally a female, because all the monsters are male up until this point. They strictly say that Mothra is female, and I was so happy. Like, I had, like, my brother had you said how you had the Godzilla action figure? Well, my brother had the Godzilla action figure, and then I constantly had the Mothra action figure. But I would, like, battle against him with my Mothra, so it was always Team Mothra versus Team Godzilla in our house. For the longest time.
And you said, so was the Mothra versus Godzilla, was that the first Godzilla film you had seen?
It was the very first Godzilla film I had seen, and it was on Laserdisc, and it was my uncle who introduced it to us. Yeah, Laserdisc. This shows how old...
Kids.
Old it was.
Yeah, kids. If you don't know what a Laserdisc is, just Google it. It was basically a giant DVD.
It was like it's a giant DVD. It's a mix between a DVD and a record.
Yeah, a DVD. Yeah.
But my uncle had the player, and this was one of the ones that he owned on it. He had, like, a few others, but this is one of the ones that he owned. And I remember, like, the first time seeing this, being completely mesmerized by this giant moth, which I thought was, like, the coolest thing ever, beating up this gigantic lizard. I really now wish I remembered how old I was. I had to be around, like, 7 or 8. Yeah, this was definitely the first one. It was definitely single digits.
When you watched this as a kid, besides Mothra, did you remember anything else about this particular film that kind of grabbed you?
The two girls and that song that they sung.
That Mothra.
Yeah.
I can't sing, sorry.
Mothra.
Yeah, they always have a spoiler alert. Mothra shows up throughout this series, but anytime those characters
it's always the two girls are different.
Well, no, the girls are the same for 2, maybe 3 of the films, and then the last time we see them that I know of, they change it to different actresses. But they always change the song. Like, their Mothra song is always different. I don't know why they just keep that the same. But and then,
re-watching it recently, I discovered my favorite character in the entire series.
What's that?
Which is that random guy who works for the newspaper who shows up in every scene with an egg of some sort, and he's either frying an egg or he's eating a hard-boiled egg, and he's just making jokes about eggs. the entire time he shows up, and like I enjoy him every time he pops up, and it's like, so what kind of egg do you have today? Like, even when Godzilla is destroying the amusement park and the guy is there because, you know, he was told to go watch the egg, he is eating a hard-boiled egg.
You should probably talk about, too, if we're going to talk about the egg, how stupid these land developers are, that they're going to center a theme park around this giant egg that they have no idea what's actually inside of it, and for all they know, it could be this giant creature that's worse than Godzilla and that will kill them all, and they just put like a tarp, like a giant tent, clear tent over it, and I guess that'll do.
It was a giant incubator.
Yeah.
Because they're like, we're going to build a theme park around it. And then once it hatches, then we'll decide what kind of theme park it will be. Maybe it's a bird.
Yeah,
they're dead set on it being a bird.
Yeah, and they just assume that they can control the creature and, you know.
If you're a dreamer, if you're an innovator, if you're someone who makes bold moves, we call those tomorrow problems. We have an opportunity with this egg. We got to strike while the iron's hot. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
This was definitely a fun film. It really had the balance of seriousness and funness that the series was trying to do with King Kong, but failed miserably with.
Yeah, they even have, I was kind of surprised, they have one scene near the end where two of the bad guy characters get kind of angry at each other, and one of them attacks the other one, and it's actually kind of serious. He's like beating him very brutally. There's a bit of blood there and stuff, and it's actually surprising to see in this film that features little pixie fairy creatures.
I think it's the first one to actually show actual blood, because the guy shoots him, and you can see that there's a gun wound and stuff.
I think it's really in this film that we really start to get, like I said in the intro, get kind of weird. Because, you know, you have these little fairy things, you know.
These fairies, this island of radioactiveness that these people are living on.
Mm-hmm. And it's weird, though, because they make it, well, it took me a little bit to warm to it. When the fairy guys first showed up, I was kind of bewildered. That it's like, wait, we're doing this? And in any other film, I think that would have been kind of the jumping the kaiju moment. But for some reason, they're able to make it work. And it just kind of makes sense within their universe eventually that you have stuff like this that is totally just ridiculous and has no anchoring in reality.
And I love that they don't when they find them in the woods, like the contractor guys make a big deal of, ooh, we should catch these two twins. But the ones in the woods are just like, oh, hey, there's these two little tiny people who are asking for help. And hey, look, there's a giant moth right behind us.
Yeah, they accept it very easily, the hero characters. They're just like, oh, okay. Well, to be fair, by this point, they've been had 3 separate monster attacks, so they might be a little bit more acclimatized to giant creatures, I guess. But do you like the weirdness of this, Gus, or do you find it too much? Or
I am team weird 100% with Godzilla. I think the weirder and more esoteric they can make these films, the better. I think that they wanted to tell a fairy story, and Godzilla's popular. Mothra has her own mythos, which I didn't even know about prior to that. I didn't realize there was a Mothra movie before she fought Godzilla.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a whole Mothra series.
Yeah, I did not know that. It makes me excited because then maybe Godzilla will cross over with other giant monsters that I don't even know. But I like the fact that they're taking risks and telling weirder stories. And like similar to how we were talking about King Kong that didn't take a big enough swing, this movie is full of big swings. Mm-hmm. And I think they hit a lot of them out of the park. They commit 100% to the fairy thing. I like that nobody calls it out as weird that Mothra exists, because Godzilla exists. I think it's great. I'm 100% for it.
I do feel, though, that Mothra... I mean, I like Mothra, and I like that we see kind of a peaceful creature for the first time in the series. I do feel, though, that I don't know if Mothra and Godzilla are really evenly matched. Because really, Mothra... Because he has 2 forms in the film. He has his fully grown form, which is kind of like a butterfly moth type thing. He can, I think, flap his wings, make the wind go really high, and he also has this webbing stuff that he can shoot out.
And the pollen.
Okay, and the pollen. And then,
there's like a yellow dust. And
Yeah.
And it's like the poisonous pollen.
Then he has like a more of a larva, freshly hatched form that we see through most of the series, which is just him kind of crawling around and shooting webbing at Godzilla. And he really, I mean, not to give too much away, but he basically defeats Godzilla. You know, this big unstoppable thing with atomic breath that he doesn't use, and then, you know, can trample through tanks and bullets and all this stuff. And he gets stopped by this, not little, but smaller than him, little worm thing that shoots webbing at him and ties him up, and he just kind of falls into the water.
Because there's 2 of them, too, don't forget. The egg hatches and there's 2 larvae that come out.
Oh, that's right. I forgot they had. Oh, I forgot now.
So it's like he's getting attacked by 2 directions.
I forgot
with the
about
same
that.
Weapon.
Yeah, because they have just one later on, but I forgot that. They had 2 that hatch out of the egg. I totally forgot about that. Well, still though, two worm things that are attacking this giant fire-breathing or atomic fire nuclear breath lizard tyrannosaurus thing. It's a bit ridiculous.
Because all he's doing is throwing rocks.
Yeah. Well, he'll spit the fire at them, but he'll do it from like a mile away, so it barely like grazes them. Instead of just walking up to them and like lighting their heads on fire.
Or you can pick up a rock. You can pick up these larvae.
And just
dude.
Break their backs or something. Do a bane on them or something.
But I'm glad you did it, because then we would be without Mothra.
Martha?
But,
is that what it's
Martha.
called? Is it a Martha?
Because it's not a moth yet, or it's not a larva. It's a Martha.
Martha the Mothra.
Mothra the Martha. Martha the Mothra. There we go. Say that 5 times fast.
Yeah, it could be a tongue twister. So I'm critical of this fight, but at the same time, I know it's just being silly and I'm being overcritical of it. But, to a certain extent, I like to think that there's some base in reality in terms of, could this thing really defeat Godzilla? And I think it's a bit of a stretch sometimes with Mothra. But it sounds like you guys like it more than I do.
Well, he doesn't really...
Yeah,
Godzilla doesn't really win nor lose. He kind of just gets stung. Like, Mothra doesn't, fully defeat him. It's more like she stuns him enough to push him back into the water where he can just go away again for a while. Go lick your wounds and come back when you're ready.
Yeah, well, I think that might have been intentional, too, because I think they were trying to... I would assume by this point they know they're trying to make a series that they're trying to less definitively kill him off or whatever. This you can just have him show up again.
We were talking earlier about what makes a good Godzilla fight in terms of using what you have. This is it. This is a great monster fight. Regardless of how feasible it is that a giant insect, and I'm using air quotes that you can't see, a giant insect could defeat a giant dinosaur. But we've got webbing, we've got poisonous pollen, we've got flight. Every tool that Mothra is equipped with is used. Similarly, Godzilla's throwing rocks. He's using his atomic breath. He's punching occasionally. This is what the series is made of. This is the perfected formula from Anguirus to King Kong to now. And now the series really starts to take off on this formula.
And there's films later in the series that we're not going to be covering in the podcast, but where he fights like a giant spider or a giant, I think a praying mantis type thing.
Giant robot at one point.
Yeah, giant robot stuff. And I think the ones that, giant sea monster crab thing, I think the ones that work particularly well for me are the ones that are when the creature he's fighting is markedly different from him. So when you have a giant praying mantis is nothing like Godzilla, or a giant butterfly, or a giant spider, or a giant crab thing. Those are all, very different from him, so it's a bit more of an interesting fight. I think he fights a giant octopus at one point. I think that's him. So those are all very different things for him to fight. So it's more interesting, and it opens the door up for more interesting moves and just characterizations and powers and abilities and all that stuff than probably King Kong Godzilla thing. Which again, in a way, except for the fire breath and their anatomy being a bit different with arm lengths and all that stuff, Godzilla and King Kong are probably a bit too similar to be terribly interesting. Might as well have it just be 2 Godzilla things or something, because even the spiny tail thing from the second film, again, it's a different fight because it's another dinosaur creature, but it's I think it's 4-legged primarily. It uses its tail more, has all these spiky things and stuff, so it's
bites.
Different. Bites, yes.
It bites.
It does bite.
It bites.
Okay, so the next film we're going to talk about is Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster. It came out in 1964, came right after Mothra vs. Godzilla. And Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster, it's the beginning of a kind of a new direction for the series. I believe this is the first movie where they introduce aliens. It's the first one where you have multiple monsters teaming up to destroy another monster. And it is the first time where Godzilla, though somewhat reluctantly, becomes a protagonist instead of the main antagonist of the series. And basically what's going on in this one is there's a cop who is trying to find a princess of some made-up Asian country, and he stumbles upon her, but she thinks she's a woman from Venus, and she keeps going around various places in Japan and foretelling of doom and destruction for everybody who lives there. And in the midst of that, Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster, comes about and starts wreaking havoc, and it's up to the humans to find a way to convince Godzilla and Mothra, and I think there's one other monster in there, to join forces and destroy Ghidorah. So I do like that they find a way to make Godzilla a protagonist, because I think by this point in the series, I think they were starting to run out of ideas for Godzilla as an antagonist, and it was getting kind of repetitive in that regard. So I think this was a nice kind of change in direction. It kind of opened doors to focus on new antagonists, mainly from this here on out, it's mainly different alien species trying to invade the planet.
I love King Ghidorah so much. I think this is where we start to see Godzilla become more of all the monsters really become more characters and less like natural disasters. We get Mothra has like her own motivations, Godzilla has his, Rodan has his, and they all kind of have to have different personalities, and that finally comes through. And this is where we start to get like an identity for Godzilla outside of he's a big lizard.
I really agree with, I like the fact that this film really starts to make the monsters on equal footing to the human heroes. The balance starts to like form for like the future films where they are going to become as important as the humans.
Do you guys like the inclusion of aliens into the series?
No.
Why not?
I will.
Why not?
Probably because, so up until this point, the monsters on Earth are monsters because of human error and nuclear mishaps. And now suddenly we're being thrown, there's outer space. I mean, yes, sooner or later that was going to be, that's probably the only way you can go, life on other planets. But I don't know, I don't think I was have been or really will ever be fully ready over the fact that there's a gigantic three-headed dragon from another planet along with this alien race from Venus of all places. I mean, now if they were to do it, it'd probably be from Mars. Makes more sense. But I just thought, okay, when you guys go and do this, it's time to stop.
So would you have rather they had stopped the series with Mothra vs. Godzilla, or would you have preferred them going in a different direction that didn't involve aliens?
Yeah, no, I would have liked them to have gone the different direction. Like, you could still do Ghidorah and make him so that he's been trapped for a very long time, which means that even before everything happened with Godzilla and all the other monsters, there was something that happened years before, centuries before. Or maybe he's like a monster of like the deep, deep past that has finally been unearthed and awakened. Making him from space is kind of out there. I buy Space Godzilla more than I buy Ghidorah being from space.
So you would have rather they kind of built on the mythology they already had with the kaiju instead of introducing alien kaiju?
Yeah.
I mean, these are all valid points on the one hand. On the other hand,
we're wrong.
I don't care. I want my Venus space dragon. He's so cool.
Hey, he's an awesome space dragon. I'm not gonna take that away from you.
Yeah, I don't
love
think
this character.
Yeah, I don't think either of us are arguing against the awesomeness of the three-headed space dragon, but
by making him not from space, we lose that, and it's so important to me. He's cool.
I'm sorry, Gus.
I like that he's from space.
I'll just take back all my comments. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, actually, I think we both agree. I think both Katie and I agree. I think this is the best one in the entire series. We love everything about it. The aliens are our favorite addition, and we're just gonna put posters of Ghidorah on our wall.
Yeah, you know when I mentioned that Mothra was my favorite, I take it back. I take it back completely.
If all I had to do to get everybody on my side to start crying about King Ghidorah, I would have been president by now.
I would try that. I wouldn't. Well, I wouldn't try that with your significant other. That might not work right. Like, take out the trash, but Ghidorah, he's so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, where else could the series go? It had to go to space. We can't just keep finding these long lost past shames in the soil. I feel like it had to break somewhere. And I'm glad it broke here. When James Bond ran out of ideas, what happened? Moonraker. We went to space. And here we are again, in space.
I don't know if Moonraker is the best example to give for
fine.
A positive, but no, I get what you mean. I get what you mean. It is kind of a, I don't know when this trend started, but yeah, it is kind of a common thing when a series gets to a certain point, they can't really do anymore, so they go to space. I think even Fast and Furious has talked about going to space. I don't think they're even joking.
I think it started here.
Yeah.
I think Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, set a precedent, and I think it should be commended for that. Because of this movie, we get Moonraker.
Yeah. No, but seriously, I do think that aliens probably were kind of a good way to do it. And it's not as ridiculous as, again, if Fast and Furious goes to space. So I think they talked about Ice Age going to space or something. It's not as ridiculous as that because there's already, it's not a huge leap if you already have, Godzilla and Mothra and all this stuff. So it's a bit more acceptable. And again, it's a nice direction to go into. And if they kept doing, like, if all 15 of these films had just been Godzilla attacking, then people finding these other monsters that just happened to be able to fight him and defeat him, it would have gotten really boring. So I do think it was a nice thing to do to kind of change the pace of it, all joking aside. But yeah, I could see Katie's complaints with it too. I think it would have been interesting to see if they had gone in the other direction with somehow having Ghidorah and all these other monsters, but without maybe doing the alien thing.
I also think that it doesn't make evolutionary sense for a creature with 3 sentient heads. There's no reason that would evolve on Earth. You know what I mean? There's a reason, like, everything kind of evolves to have, like, 1 head. But, like, that might not be true for Venus. And, like, because his design is literally alien, he can't, like, just be another big dinosaur.
See, I think it would be cool if this was, like, a prequel to, like, all the others. With it ending with him, like, being, like, going to space, defeated and going to space or something like that. And then coming back in a later one as Ghidorah the space monster. That way, everyone wins.
Oh, like making him some kind of primordial evil that Godzilla defeats, who then leaves and comes back?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I see that. I like that. It's been about 5 minutes since the last time I said it, so I'm going to say it again. He's really cool. He breathes lightning. He has 3 heads. He's gold, so he's obviously wealthy. Ghidorah is the best monster, and I will hear no argument.
Yeah, he's probably the coolest looking, except for possibly Godzilla and some of his designs, but he's probably the best looking of all of them.
I'll agree with Gus. As far as the monsters go, he is probably my favorite design.
And they really make it, I think, for introducing Godzilla as a protagonist for the first time, I think they picked a really good monster to start that out with, because they do make him very formidable. Not just the 3 heads thing, but he is, very tough and hard to beat. So there's a lot of good things to recommend about this film.
That said, the human story is very laughable.
Yeah.
They put too much thought into the monster that they just, this time around, they just were like, whatever. We'll do whatever we want with the story.
I thought it was forgettable, which I think this is, like, one of the first times that's happened, in as much as, like, we've talked this entire time and barely referenced the human story, because the monster story itself, even on a character level, is interesting, not just in terms of spectacle. Like, we have the monsters making choices and, like, having an arc, and that's not really happened. So, yeah, I kind of forget about the human story, especially because, that means there's less screen time for Ghidorah, and I'm not into that.
Yeah, they don't do a great job with the balance for this one, and it is one that gets kind of, the human story does kind of try on my patience a little bit, but it's certainly not the worst of the series in terms of the human stories. Okay, so we're gonna skip a few movies now. Like I mentioned up top, we don't have time to talk about every film. Between this one, there was another invasion story, which was pretty good. That was Invasion of Astro Man. There were two films that were made for specifically for television that were smaller scale, that were kind of island adventures with kaiju. One was Ebera, Horror of the Deep. I probably mispronounced that. And then Son of Godzilla. Again, those are both kind of lighter adventures that I personally like quite a bit. But the next one we're going to talk about specifically is Destroy All Monsters, and that one came out in 1968, and it takes place in the far-off future of 1999, where Earth has achieved world peace, and humans are keeping all the kaiju, all the friendly ones anyway, on a place called Monster Island, where they appear to be living in peace, and Earth has an advanced space program and all that stuff, but an alien force begins controlling the kaiju and a number of human scientists, and kaiju start attacking world capitals, and the human characters have to find a way to regain control of a certain Earth science station and free the kaiju from the alien control before the aliens take over or destroy the planet. So this one is actually, I think, in terms of the alien invasion Godzilla films, this one is probably one of my favorites, along with Invasion of Astro Man. I think both of those films really build a lot of tension, and this one has more tension than Invasion of the Astro Man, because in Astro Man they also control at least some of the kaiju. I don't know if it's as many of them, but this one they're also controlling some of the people, and they really just make the stakes seem just insurmountable. You really want to know how the humans are going to find a way to win this time. So I think this one is probably the best of the high stakes films.
As far as like Godzilla films go, like when you mention Godzilla films, this is usually the go-to. Oh my god, I remember this growing up, and it's definitely like where I fall. Growing up, this was the film that we watched over and over and over and over again, and you know, I still find it as enjoyable now as I had then. I thought the battles were really fun to watch. Seeing everyone team up was always amazing, and you know, like I said before, the score is one of the most memorable things about the film, besides the actual fighting of all the monsters.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned that I think there's 11 monsters, kaiju in the film, which I think is the most you see in any of the films. It's certainly the film where you see the most monsters be the most active. There's some other films where you kind of see kaiju, but then mostly it's just Godzilla. But this one, there's, I think all the kaiju you see are pretty active throughout the whole thing. And it is kind of fun to see all of these come together. Some of them we have seen, I think, in some of the other films. Some of them we haven't. So either this one or Invasion of Astro Man, it reintroduces the new monster from the second film, which is somehow alive again. They don't really explain that. But it was nice to kind of see all these monsters come back. As a climax, it is certainly big and nostalgic and celebratory with it, and also being new and just really solid production.
This movie feels the most like a WWE kind of plot line, where they just found an excuse to get as many fighters into the ring as possible. Like, of course, the good guys have to turn evil, and the evil guys are fighting them. It just becomes a free-for-all, and I love it so much. It's pure spectacle. It's the perfect Godzilla movie, in as much as, like, if I have to pick one Godzilla movie to take with me to a desert island, I'm picking the one with the most monster fights in it.
Yeah, I think they could do a good job, though, with their excuse for getting all these monsters together. It doesn't seem forced at all.
No, I think it's the best way they could have done it. I think anything else would have felt a lot more contrived than aliens are taking over all of it and making them fight.
Like I said beginning of this one that I thought it was the best of the alien invasion type Godzilla films. Do you guys find one that's better than this, or do you think this kind of, out of at least those Godzilla films in this series, is this one kind of on the top of them all for you?
I have a soft spot for Mechagodzilla. I like the alien race in that one with the purple blood. But this one is great. The aliens are creepy, and they understand what their secret weapon is. Oh, when all else fails, we do have King Ghidorah.
That's really why you like it. You just like that they bring Ghidorah back.
I like that they recognize him as the greatest of them, yeah.
I like Terror of Mechagodzilla more, but when we get there, I'll explain why. But story-wise, I feel like that story was better. This one made the aliens more tolerable. That said, the aliens were a lot more tolerable in this, more so than in the Ghidra film.
This one also feels like, in tone, almost closer to like a TV show. Like it feels pretty episodic in terms of like it's different monsters, different cities. You could see this maybe 10 years in the future when it was made as a TV show, as like a weekly serial or a weekly procedural of like, this week he's attacking this city. Godzilla, go fight him. It almost feels like Power Rangers-esque.
Yeah, but I think that's that's probably partially, I think, due to how much influence Power Rangers got from Godzilla in the first place.
I do like how it flirts with the line also of like, it's almost too much. Like if there were 12 monsters, I feel like we'd have like monster overload and it'd be too much to follow or too difficult. But 11, for some reason, it's that sweet spot.
It wasn't enough. They needed at least one more in there. They didn't even dozen.
Yeah, maybe they should have brought the second Mothra back or something. Or just bring a whole baby Mothras in. This whole team.
I agree. Let's have more Mothra. Mothra, actual moth form, should be in, like, everything.
Oh, also, shout out to Kumonga, the spider monster. The spider kaiju.
Yeah.
Or not, because I'm arachnophobic, and I can't watch any of the scenes that he keeps popping up on, and every time he does, I freak out.
What a difference a pair of legs make. You love Mothra, but hate Kumonga.
It's spiders, man. It's spiders. I can do moths. I can do bugs. I can do insects. I can do moths. I can do, like, wormy, but I give it 8 eyes and 8 legs and forget about it. The thing creeps me out.
Okay, so we're going to skip a few films again between Destroy All Monsters and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. There was All Monsters Attack, which was a very small scale story about a little boy. Then there was Godzilla vs. Hedorah, Godzilla vs. Gigan, Godzilla vs. Megalon. And then eventually we get to Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, which is the second to last film in this era of Toho Godzilla films. It was made in 1974, or came out in 1974 at least, and it's about a mystical prophecy is foretelling of a monster destroying a Japanese city and probably Japan as well. And as the prophecy is resurfacing, a robot that looks like Godzilla and actually might be stronger than Godzilla starts wreaking havoc, and Mechagodzilla, who was built and is being controlled by aliens, of course. The only thing that can stop him is Godzilla and this other ancient slumbering beast that needs to be awakened called King Caesar. So it's up to the humans to find a way to fulfill the prophecy of two monsters coming together to destroy another one by waking up King Caesar. So this film is kind of a mixed bag for me. For one, it's kind of, again, it's the second to last film, and it's very obvious, I think, that they're kind of running out of steam by this point in the series. They do bring in some mystical stuff, which is kind of interesting with the King Caesar thing. And, Mechagodzilla is a very it's a cool kind of creature. It's nice that they kind of go with something mechanical instead of another kind of natural force, whether it be alien or from Earth. And they really make Mechagodzilla this terrible force, and you believe that Godzilla would need help with this because he is so just almost unstoppable. But at the same time, there's some stuff that's unsatisfying. They have this prophecy about two creatures coming together to destroy what turns out to be Mechagodzilla. By the end of it, they don't really team up. They just kind of, King Caesar wakes up, fights Mechagodzilla for a bit, starts losing, and then Godzilla comes in, struggles for a bit on his own, and then eventually on his own destroys Mechagodzilla. So it's kind of a letdown. You don't actually see them team up. They just kind of tag team.
This one for me, there was an independent video rental place near my house when I was a kid, and this was the only Godzilla movie they had, and I wore that tape out. Like, this is the Godzilla movie I've probably seen the most. I love it. I love King Caesar, even though he looks ridiculous. I love the aliens from the third planet from the black hole. Maybe it was because I was a literal child, but none of it felt like it lost steam. This one just clicked every way for me.
So this is one of the ones that my uncle also had on Laserdisc. And I remember him showing it to us. and being intrigued by everything going on with the whole Mystic and King Caesar. I always thought he was like a giant oversized dog. But it's one that definitely has like sentimental value. That said, you can tell that they were starting to run out of ideas. Like with Ghidra, there's nowhere else to really go except for space. There's nowhere else really to go but robot evil version of your protagonist, of your hero.
So it seems like for both of you guys, this is a pretty nostalgic film for you. And Katie, you said there's some stuff to you that maybe didn't hold up quite as well, I think, with your recent viewing. But guys, did you find, even as an adult, that it still holds up pretty well? Or is that, I mean, how do you feel about it looking at it now?
I mean, sure, it's ridiculous. But yeah, for some reason, my nostalgia goggles never quite came all the way off for this one. I like the design of Mechagodzilla. I like that he looks unique enough. Also, I was one of the few people in the world that played the Godzilla GameCube fighting game, Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee, and Mechagodzilla was my main in that. He was the one I always played, so I have a soft spot for Mecha G. Yeah, it was hard for me to divorce my personal biases from watching the film. It doesn't quite hold up. There is a mishmash of a lot of stuff. I feel like you can either go all the way Mystic or all the way Alien, and never the twain shall meet. For some reason, I was also able to, everything I just said, fuck all that, I love this.
I wonder if they could have done, to kind of address those issues you had with all the kind of ideas in there. I wonder if they could have done, I mean, it's cliche, but at least would have maybe tied stuff together a bit better. Some sort of comment about science versus superstition or something like that. That might have been an interesting way of kind of melding the two together. But instead, we just kind of have science and magic without any scene kind of tying them together.
Also, Godzilla has, by this point, it's a pretty flooded market in terms of kaiju stuff. There's other kaiju properties, so maybe they also felt they had to be competitive and throw in a bunch of elements to appeal to as many people as possible. Because by this point, Ultraman has been out for a while, Gamera has also been out for a while, so maybe they just felt like robots, ancient magic, somebody's going to like this thing. And somebody's going to like it more than they like Gamera versus Gaios or the latest Ultraman.
They are trying to find a way to keep the series going and introduce these new things that I think will keep people interested. I just think, I mentioned earlier in the podcast that the films for the most part kind of follow a certain formula, and kind of by this point you can really kind of see the formula. And I think maybe the ideas of, a mystical creature and all this stuff, and obviously Mechagodzilla is really cool and stuff. Those ideas are fine. I think the more of the problem is that they're not, if they really wanted to kind of help keep things fresh, they really just needed to try, again, kind of almost throw their formula out and try something, really create a new kind of thing to do. And that would have helped keep things fresh more than just introducing yet another, or I guess two in this case, kind of kaiju creatures.
I was wondering if he is a compelling enough villain, Mechagodzilla, on his face. Is he a King Ghidorah level thing where he can be like a nemesis? Because I'm really not sure. He might be too similar.
I don't know, because he has all this robotic stuff that I think is one different from the other bad guys we've seen, the big monster ones anyway. He has all the missiles, and he has these laser type things and stuff like that. He has some stuff that's similar, but I think for the most part it's pretty different. Yeah, I mean, the basic shape of him is the same, but his kind of weapons and, the ways to defeat him is different. So I think it works. He works by himself as a villain as well as I think any of the other bad guy kaiju do.
I do like the aliens themselves, the aliens from the third planet from the black hole, with their kind of almost like Planet of the Apes-ish design.
Yeah, that was kind of a rip-off, but I do like it, but yeah.
I thought they were pretty formidable. I like that they were actually pit against the humans. There was this smaller battle going on, or smaller plot of literally a fight between the two, as well as the, if we zoom out, we can watch kaiju fight as well. But even the aliens versus humans plot line was compelling enough to be interesting to me.
Actually, until rewatching it, I totally forgot there were aliens in it. This is one of those where the human story was just okay, and I really enjoyed the whole monster thing instead. Then again, I'm not a huge Alien fan.
Yeah, this one, I think, the human stuff isn't great. It's with this one and a bit of the next film, too. I did get kind of impatient for it. I mean, I enjoyed the monster stuff, but some of the other stuff I was just kind of hoping would end, just because, again, it was getting kind of old by this point. But yeah, for me, it's not the strongest one. Okay, so Terror of Mechagodzilla was made the very next year in 1975. It was the last film of this era, and it was also the last Godzilla film that Toho made, I think until 1985, when they made Godzilla 1985, which was, I think, a very creative, not lazy title. But in this era, they bring back certain things. Mechagodzilla is back, along with, I think it's the very same aliens from Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. And I think even the main alien bad guy is played by the same, he's not supposed to be the same character, but I think it's the same actor. After Mechagodzilla was defeated in Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, the aliens kind of salvage him and start building him up again and trying to make him better and smarter and more able to defeat Godzilla. And in the meantime, there's this other undersea creature who we find out is being controlled by a scientist who is thought dead. And he's played by, I think, the same actor who played the hero scientist in the first film, who's been in sporadically in some of these films here and there. And it's appropriate that he was in the first one and he's in this one. But this time he's playing a bad guy who's controlling this undersea creature who starts wreaking havoc on Japan. And the human characters are trying to uncover the mystery of why this creature is attacking. And there's also this love story between the scientist's daughter and one of the good guy characters, and it's kind of up to them to find a way to stop the sea creature and Mechagodzilla. They're both kind of a match for Godzilla. So for this one, there's some stuff in this I don't like. Again, it is kind of running out of steam, the series, but I think as a movie to go out on, it's pretty good. The story with the scientist and his daughter has a lot of pathos. You can understand their motivations for why they're doing what they're doing. They're not necessarily entirely bad, and the story is kind of touching in certain regards. Mechagodzilla, again, is even more of formidable than he was in the last film, and in the final fight with him, the sea creature and Godzilla, I was kind of on the edge of my seat of how Godzilla would defeat these two. And they also, I think this film also brings back, for the first time, I think, since the first film, it brings back the main theme of the main theme of the first film. I think it brings it back, or at least it features it more than the other ones did. It's kind of the main theme, and as kind of a film to go out on, I liked hearing that theme again. It kind of got my emotions going and got me excited. But what did you guys think of this film and of the one to go out on? Was it a good one to go out on, or what did you guys think?
I thought it was. It's actually, as far as like the human stories go, it's actually one of my favorites besides the first film. But it has one of my favorite characters. I absolutely love Katsura, I think is her name. I think that's how you pronounce it. I love...
She's the scientist's daughter.
She's the scientist's daughter, yeah. Who turns out to be an android because she was killed, but the aliens brought her back, and then as like a way of collateral. And I'm a sucker for those types of stories, and I just really enjoyed seeing that struggle of her having to fight control over herself again. And I do kind of wish that the sea creature had a little bit of a different design. He was just very laughable. I think that's my only big flaw with this. Also because once again, they build him up and then he's there for 5 seconds and then gets knocked out.
I think I was reading he's the only Godzilla creature of that era that didn't really catch on. I think this is the only film that creature's ever been in. He's never really become popular. Yeah, he isn't the best of them. I mean, after Mechagodzilla and Ghidorah and stuff, he is kind of a letdown for one of the final creatures. His special move is he can, create gusts of wind, which is terribly frightening.
It's really hard to stand up to Mechagodzilla and Godzilla, and that's tough for any kaiju, and Titanosaurus, I don't think was up to it. I don't think he was unique enough. He's also bipedal, and having 3 different bipedal monsters and only 3, it doesn't draw your eye. Maybe if he was a quadruped like Anguirus, or a flyer like Rodan or Mothra, you could get into it more and he could be unique enough. But in this one, he just felt like the Ringo of the movie. Why are you here?
I think that might be an insult to Ringo Starr, but I see what you mean, though. Katie, you said that you like the human story of this one. I do like it, too. I think it is probably the best human story that they have after the original film. I think it's the one that hits me the most on an emotional level. I mean, there's other ones that, obviously have emotion in them, but they don't affect me a whole lot. But this one, I think, really kind of hit me particularly like the first film did. You really kind of feel the emotion of this one, and there's a lot of the kind of tragedy of it. And I think it might be one of the only films in the series, except for the first one, that really doesn't have a happy ending for all the good guy characters, which I really liked.
Yeah, I need to make a confession. Earlier on Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, when I was talking about how compelling I found the human story, I have watched enough Godzilla movies in preparation for this podcast that they have blended together. This is the human story I was talking about.
Okay, so everyone, he totally forgot about the other one, and he was talking about this one.
Yeah, so I was defending a completely forgettable human storyline.
They do start to merge together, I will admit.
No, they do. I mean, and the confession for me, to prepare for this, I did have to double check a few of the movies to remember which ones were which, because yes, they do blend together. I mean, the non-alien invasion ones stand out pretty well, but all the alien invasion ones kind of mesh together, and it can be very hard to keep track. Like, I get the plots for Astro Man and Destroy All Monsters confusing, or I get them mixed up. So I
don't think anyone's going to drag me to the guillotine for getting the human storyline of Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla and the terror of Mechagodzilla mixed up.
No. I'm
not expecting any acts.
I mean, honestly, I watched Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla just the other day, and we just talked about it, and I'm already forgetting what the human story was in that one. So, yeah, it is very... It's not the best one. Let's put it that way. They did a lot better with this one.
Yeah, no, this one, the storyline is dope. This one has a garrote murder in it. This one's great. I love this one.
I don't think they necessarily planned for this one to be the final film in this era, but it works very well as that. But is there anything you guys would have liked to have seen, this being the last one in this kind of continuity? Is there anything else you guys would have liked to have seen in it?
I don't really think there's a way to, properly end a series like this. You can't really kill off your main character. You can't really give him a full-on happy ending. This one also kind of just ends. Oh, look, they saved the day. It's like, all right, we saved the day. We're going to go rest again. Call us next Tuesday when there's another monster.
Yeah, I think it's nice that he's kind of besting the returned doppel version of himself. I think that's kind of like a nice note to leave Godzilla on. He dismisses, the other monster flees into the water, and the Robo-Godzilla, the anti-Godzilla, is destroyed, literally decapitated. That's a pretty triumphant arc for Godzilla. Not only is he the best kaiju, he's the best version of the best kaiju. So, I mean, at least on a hero level, I feel like it's a satisfying conclusion.
Yeah, and they give him, in the final battle, they give him a lot of great hero moments where he finally starts beating Mechagodzilla, and then he defeats the undersea creature, and then while he's defeating...
Titanosaurus.
Yeah, and then while he's doing the final move on Mechagodzilla, he's also, does some atomic fire and destroys the flying saucers that are flying away at the same time. So the original theme is back and stuff, so it really makes Godzilla really awesome in that final fight. It's probably the best he ever is in any of these fights, and the most kind of badass and cool he is. This is probably one of my favorite climactic fights. Some of the other ones get kind of ridiculous or underwhelming or repetitive or whatever, but this one was really cool.
Yeah, this one's like a total epic showdown from start to finish.
And this one, unlike the other ones, he doesn't have any help. I mean, the humans help him out a little bit, but he doesn't have another monster, so it's all Godzilla. Even again, I don't think they planned this as the last one, but it ultimately being the last one, it was kind of great just to see Godzilla essentially, for the most part, on his own doing it, and it's not another character another kaiju that's helping him. It's all Godzilla, and it's kind of reminding you of the awesomeness of that character.
So how long do we have to wait till they release the second like the second giant series, because it didn't realize that a lot more of the films I remember watching as a kid are actually in the second group of Godzilla films.
So, was that something you guys would want to see as a release of? I forget how many films are in the next era, but would you want to see them release the other series of films that they did in the 80s and onward?
Yeah, I want it.
You want it? Do you like those film, Gus? Would you want to see that?
It.
Yes, one of them is Mecha King Ghidorah.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yes, it's his three-headed dragon with robot heads.
Yeah, no, 100%. I absolutely would like to see more Godzilla movies, especially with the Criterion treatment, because especially those 80 ones, because they're so ridiculous.
It's so funny because I remember one and I couldn't remember the name, but it was the one with the giant plant. I don't even remember the plot, but I remember I have images in my head of scenes that I know are from that film, but it's been ages since I haven't rewatched any of those, and now I'm like, I kind of want to go back.
Biolante, the killer rose, is the plant.
Yes. I think I remember that plant. I actually had an action figure that was that plant.
I feel left out of all these references. I don't know.
You just should go and like watch some of them.
No.
Some of the later ones.
Some of the
80s ones.
No.
They're fun.
They might be fun, but after watching 15, technically 16 of these films in very close proximity, I am going to take a very long break from kaiju films and watch, I think the next film, I think I'm just going to plop in or stream My Dinner with Andre on Criterion Channel, because I need something that's totally different. And I'm not joking either. I probably will watch that as kind of a change of pace, because I've seen so many monsters fight each other over the past little while. I am very much done.
Not enough King Ghidorah in My Dinner with Andre.
My dinner with King Ghidorah.
I don't dinner with King Ghidorah. You kidding?
And okay, so I think but you still have like Wallace Shawn voices Godzilla.
Yeah,
and King Ghidorah is voiced by Andre. I'm getting his last name. Yeah, I think that could work. For my take on that, the next box sets, I would be interested to see them. I don't know if they have any plans to do so. Assuming it might partially depend on how well this one's going to sell, though with all the buzz around this box set, I'm sure it's going to sell very well. But yeah, I'd be interested to see it if they do one, and I'm still doing the podcast at that point. We'll cover it. Okay, so that about wraps us up for this podcast. Again, there's an article on 25yearslatersite.com that I wrote that kind of is mini kind of reviews of each of the films that are on the box set. So if you want to at least know my thoughts on the films that we didn't cover, you can go to that. There's also a video on our YouTube channel that is a top 10 list of reasons why you should watch these films. So please check both of those out and subscribe to everything you can subscribe to. And for the next one of these podcasts, I haven't worked out what the topic of that is going to be. If you guys, any of you guys listening, have anything you would like us to cover that's Criterion related, again, that's either been released on physical media, the DVD or Blu-rays, or is on the Criterion channel, in terms of topics like road movies, horror movies, this, that, or the other thing, please let us know in comments to the video, the article, or this podcast, and I will look into possibly doing those. But for now, you can follow me on Twitter at CinemaPackRat. You can follow Katie at K Bienvenue, her last name, and Gus at Gus on Horror. You can also find 25 Years Later on Facebook, and you can also follow it on Twitter at 25YLSite. And of course, you can also visit its website at 25yearslatersite.com. The Criterion Collectors podcast is made for 25 Years Later, and it was created and is hosted and edited by me. But for now, thank you guys for joining me for this one. And that's it for now. And until next time, I will see you guys later.